Okay, so liban doon sa 1.7 billion
Na
pesos
advertising.
na advertising, ito naman experts, how much is this naman?
Yung, again, let me remind, no, yung sa advertising, nag-apply ng 1.4, binigyan ng 1.7. Dito naman sa so-called regulatory liaison and compliance, na ang description nila dito is to pay the experts, regulatory reset experts, to advise the Energy Regulatory Commission in interpreting their own rules. Ang hiningi
So, kukuha ng consultants o experts para ang Energy Regulatory Commission
Maintindihan yung rules
maintindihan ang ginawa nilang mga regulasyon.
Well, to put it in proper perspective, ERC created rules or had written rules that are so complicated, they have difficulty understanding
obviously,
it. So kumuha sila ng consultants na ang tawag ay regulatory reset experts. Ang hiningi ng Meralco was 2 billion and 60 million. Ang ibinigay ng ERC, 2 billion and 200 million. 2.2 billion. Dinagdagan ng about 160 million. Ang masaklap
yung kaya
dito,
para doon sa mga mga commissioners
but
yun.
ang masaklap dito, Kamentong, if you look at the rules implementing regulatory liaison and compliance, Energy Regulatory Commission chooses the consultant, practically appoints and selects the consultant, defines the terms of reference, and orders authority to pay. Ang utility is just a pocketbook or a conduit ng pagbabayad. The whole thing is controlled by the Energy Regulatory Commission. And the ERC even had the goal to put into the rules to say na we have nothing to do with the contract. After saying we select, we choose, we order payment, we have nothing to do with the contract. And here is the injustice to the Meralco customers. Because of the rules of ERC, that the charging of regulatory liaison and compliance is dependent on the volume of sales. Because in the determining year, the reference year, Meralco sold 81% of power. We are paying 2.2 billion pesos.
So, yung expert interpretations and opinions is dependent on the volume of sales.
Exactly. Hindi ko nga makita ang correlation.
Anong
Hindi ko
sense
makita ang
nun?
correlation. Hindi ko makita ang correlation. But that is the rule of the ERC. And unfortunately, they have not been asked to explain it or to account for it in any forum. Yun lang ang mahirap.
So all of this really, lahat ng ito ay nakabalot doon sa PBR, performance-based rate.
Regulation.
Bago yung PBR, hindi naman ganyang kasalimuot itong mga issues na to. At dahil simple, mahirap magpalusot ang Meralco at yung ibang mga power generators.
Actually, Kamentong, doon sa return on rate base, which was the rate setting methodology at the time that EPIRA was adopted and before the alternative PBR was put in place. Return on rate base was the rate recovery mechanism for the longest time. It was the rate recovery mechanism of preference to the customers. Mga 50 years.
50 years na.
Kasi at that time, walang liwanag, walang rules. Nagkaroon lang tayo ng shift to PBR after the landmark, after the landmark decision of Justice Reynato Puno on that led to the 30 billion Meralco refund. Anong decision ni Justice Puno? Sabi niya, in return on rate base, asset to be recoverable should be used or useful. And it is based
sa
on
business of generating and distributing electricity.
And it is based on historical value or time of use. Ang operating expense should be prudent, reasonable, necessary, and redounding to the benefit of the customers. In other words, nilinaw yung criteria. Nung maglinaw na yung criteria, naiintindihan natin at we can hold the utility and the regulator accountable.
Yung corporate income tax.
Corporate income tax is not chargeable. At mayroong cap ang return at 12% as a public service utility. So, at that time na malinaw yung rules, immediately, ERC shifted or
gumawa sila ng bagong
start yung shift to PBR, where in contradiction to the Supreme Court decision, corporate income tax is taxable and there is no limit to the level ng return on capital.
And itong PBR, nagagawa ng ERC dahil sa EPIRA na binibigyan ng poder yung ERC na gumawa ng sariling formula nila.
Kamentong, ang ginamit dito na platform, yung EPIRA, because EPIRA has a portion there that says ERC can adopt an alternative internationally accepted rate setting methodology, alternative to RORB. And there is also a portion there that says that provided it yields a reasonable return to the investor. But there is a portion that is always omitted by Energy Regulatory Commission, which says that provided also that it results in a just rate to the consumers. Ang sinasabi lang parati ng ERC, puputak kami ng rules or mag-change kami ng rules that will give a reasonable return to the consumer. They forget, to the investor. They forget the portion that says it should result in a just rate to the consumer.
And
now,
I was mentioning least cost pa.
Now, the question, Kamentong, is, Meralco is now raking in 18 billion net earning a month. Is that a reasonable return?
A return on investment that they get from us.
No,
diba?
and this is even the worst part. It is a return on an investment of, tingnan mo ang annual report ng Meralco, the equity is 63 billion. But they peg the return on the asset base, which is 132 billion.
Which was also
but remember,
increased.
of the 132 billion asset base now, a good portion of that came from asset appraisal, reappraisal,
In
which is not
2006.
really money brought in, and a bigger portion of it even came from the rate payments that they collected from us. In fact, in the third regulatory period, their capital expense is more than 30 billion. That 30 billion went into the asset base, and we are being charged 14.9% as weighted average cost of capital.
Let's recap that. No? And Jojo Borja always reminds us that yung asset base was really in around 46 billion. And I think Mang Naro also.
Yes.
In 2006, by a stroke of a pen, walang bagong makina, walang bagong perang pinasok, dahil sa reappraisal, naging 100...
well, actually, pumunta muna yun sa about 81 billion.
Tapos
thereabouts. And then, annual accruals, umabot na yan sa 132 billion.
Anong annual accruals? Yung increase ng value annually?
The capital expense that we have been collected from us.
Tayo ang nagagastos nun.
The reappraisals that have also been done, umabot na yan sa 132 billion.
So anong equity nila dyan?
Go to the annual report on Meralco. The equity in Meralco is 63 billion.
63 billion, tapos ang kanilang income 18 billion. That is how much
about
on equity?
27%.
27%.
If the 18 billion earning, you peg it against the equity on their books, that's 27%.
Ayan dahil trilyon yan, ano? Talon-talo ang tubong lugaw dyan.
Pero ang masakit talaga dyan, Kamentong, the asset build-up came from us.
From us
and
also.
If you look at
Tayong nagbayad noon.
If you look at the classic definition in the books of what is return on capital, it is given to the investor for the money that he has put in for the asset that is used in the business. And very clearly, the assets that are now in use in the business, a good part of it came from reappraisal or appraisal increase and came from the capital expense that has been collected from us.
So, how do we explain it in Tagalog? Yung nilaki nung kanilang asset base ay dahil lang sa sa kalkulasyon sa papel, walang totoong bagong pinasok na pera.
Kamentong, kung sa Tagalog, ang explanation ko lang dyan, ginigisa tayo sa sarili nating mantika. Ang solusyon dyan, either palitan natin ang kusinero or itapon natin yung mantika.
Ay, parehong isabay na natin, kusinero at mantika. Okay, we have our last 5 minutes. No? Now, itong nakaraang mga linggo, may mga anunsyo na magsisimula na yung Meralco project in Singapore, $800 million. Saan nanggaling yung pera kundi sa atin, di ba? At bakit inilalabas nila samantalang sinasabi nila kulang-kulang ang kuryente dito? Ano?
Yeah, that's exactly the point. Isa yan sa medyo talagang masakit para sa atin na habang tayo dito ay nagpuproblema sa supply ng kuryente, ito naman ating number 1 na utility, gumawa ng malaking investment sa isang 800 megawatt na liquefied natural gas, LNG, combined cycle plant in Jurong Island in Singapore. Ito ay hindi bagong planta, ito ay existing plant na. Ito yung GMRI investment sa Singapore na joint venture ng isang Indian company with Petronas. No? Ang unang ginawa dito, Kamentong, noong March 2013, mayroon silang disclosure statement sa Philippine Stock Exchange as a listed company at doon sa disclosure statement, doon natin nakita. ang Meralco ay nag-organize ng Meralco Power Gen, MPG. Kung naaalala nyo, yung mga nanood sa hearing nung oral argument sa Supreme Court, isa ito sa tinanong ni Justice Leonen, I think, sa abogado ng Meralco. Ano yung Meralco Power Gen? At that time, walang maipaliwanag o walang maisagot ang abogado ng Meralco despite his very eloquent defense and presentation for Meralco. This is one item na hindi niya masagot. Ito ang kasagutan niyan. Meralco Power Gen is a wholly owned subsidiary that has gone into a joint venture with a wholly owned subsidiary of First Pacific Company of Hong Kong, both of which are owned by the Salim Group in Indonesia. Ang inorganize nila is the FPM Power Holdings, 40% Meralco Power and 60% FPPA. They went into a share purchase agreement with GMRIL, and under the share purchase agreement, they bought the 70% interest of GMR in their Jurong plant for $488 million plus an additional $49 million in 2013 for a total of $537 million. Ang tanong natin, saan nanggaling yung $537 million na yan? Kung isang kusing man lamang nanggaling sa rate payments natin, then this is something
Labag sa batas
na
yan.
labag sa batas. It is not only violative of the rule that all expenses should be used for the providing service to the captive customer, and it should be prudent, reasonable, necessary. It is really outside of the franchise area of Meralco, so I cannot see how it can be an investment. I mean, it can be a valid expense. Kung ito naman ay hindi valid expense, anong ginagawa ng Meralco? Bakit ang Meralco madadamay dito sa ganito?
Well, kung galing sa tubo yan ng Meralco, na galing sa binabayad natin, di ba may prinsipyo dyan sa ating batas, sa mga prangkisa and so on, na ang kinikita dyan, dapat para din sa improvement ng services natin, di ba?
Ang nakakataka lang dito, bakit ang ating regulator natutulog at hindi ito tinitingnan? Bakit hindi ito ang gawing advisory ng Meralco para ipaliwanag sa atin na kung walang
dinabulgar sila kung yan
walang ka-involved ang tao dito, if this does not come from our rate payments, tell us so in the advisories.
Okay.
If it comes from our rate payments, then explain to us why and how our rate payments found its way to Singapore in a $537 million
Okay, this is our last minute for this portion. So, anong conclusion natin? Unang-una, kailangan talaga yung EPIRA i-review at kung pwede sa akin, ibasura, ibalik sa dating RORB and other systems, if not to renationalize it. Ikaw naman ka, Butch.
Well, sabi ko nga in another forum when I was asked about EPIRA, it is just kako a classic case of a not so bad law that has been implemented by not so good men. And ang nangyari dyan, lahat ng mga loopholes have been manipulated and twisted against our disadvantage. If only for that, there is really a serious need for a group to go and take an honest-to-goodness look at everything that is there in the present system.
Well, we have run out of time for this portion. In the next portion, we'll be discussing how consumers can get together and organize Consumer Affairs Office formally supported by state funding so that may laban naman ang consumer dito sa mga dambuhalang utilities that are privatized. No, Butch?
At least it will, that kind of an office, as you describe it, at least will give us a fighting chance, and I think we will have a good chance of being able to straighten these things out and keep our utilities honest.
We'll take this last break and stick around.